I am very pleased to be here. I don't know, can you hear me? Yes, now it's perfect. So, again, a very good afternoon to all of you. I'm really pleased to be with you here in Bilbao and to speak about this first parallel session for the afternoon on inspection on MSDs prevention in enterprises, challenges and innovative solutions. And I would say that this particular session, which is dedicated to the presentation of the preliminary results of the Senior Labour Inspector Committee's inspection and enforcement campaign on musculoskeletal disorders, is really of utmost relevance. We are all aware that MSDs affect millions of workers in the EU, and work-related MSDs can be, in the worst case, leading to disability. And they are usually not linked to a single cause, but to a combination of physical, psychosocial, organizational, and individual factors. The EU Strategic Framework on Health and Safety at Work 2021-2027 aims to maintain and improve the high health and safety standards of EU workers. It encourages EU countries and stakeholders to work together on common priorities by laying down an updated vision for OSH and putting the focus on three cost-cutting objectives. First of all, anticipating and managing change in the new world of work brought about by the green, digital and demographic transitions. Second, improving prevention of workplace accidents and illnesses. And third, increasing preparedness for any future health crisis. EU occupational safety and health legislation is essential to protect the almost 170 million workers in the EU. It has allowed to reduce health and safety risks at work and to improve OSH standards across the European Union. However, health and safety at work challenges remain. And the COVID-19 pandemic has put the spotlight on the risks that need to be addressed, and among them, the need to further improve the prevention of MSDs in light of our new ways of work. Maintaining and improving protection standards for workers is therefore an ongoing challenge and a necessity. And besides health and well-being, there is a strong economical case for high level of worker protection. Work-related accidents and illnesses cost the EU economy over 3.3% of GDP annually, which was, in 2019, 460 billion euro. So good practices in OSH makes businesses more productive, competitive and sustainable. And as indicated in the strategic framework, its success depends largely on its implementation at national level and at local level. And to achieve this, effective and equivalent enforcement of the EU-OSH rules are really essential. And in this respect, Member States are invited in the strategic frameworks to strengthen their enforcement efforts. The campaign on MSDs organized by the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee is very well timed, and it fits with the objectives of the new strategic framework. It has really been rewarding to focus on the integration of MSD prevention in OSH management and not just observing and measuring specific shortcomings. I think that today's presentation will also allow that the use of evidence-based methods for assessments of risks for MSDs in OSH management supports employers in fulfilling their obligation. The campaign has further highlighted, for example, the importance of workers' participation in OSH management and the size of the enterprise for the quality of the risk assessment. And here I would particularly like to thank the SLIC MX working group for their excellent work carried out with determination and a lot of commitment. I am also thankful that Member States have participated to such a large extent in the campaign, and we have today many Member States present and willing to exchange with partners and with the other member states and learning more about this campaign. So finally, I'm also thankful for the support and the collaboration with EU-OSHA colleagues under the Healthy Workplace campaign, and in particular the very positive collaboration with the EU-OSHA focal points. So with these very few introductory words, I would like to open the session and give the floor to you, Annemarie, to start the chairing. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, and thank you for this enlightening introduction to this session. Right now, I would give the floor to Angeliki, who is the Vice Chair of Working Group MX. So please, Angeliki, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Charlotte, for your very kind and inspiring words about our MX working group work to the campaign. Good afternoon to all of you. At that point, I would like also, on behalf of our amazing and very organizing chair, Ms. Minke Versal, who couldn't be here today, to thank EU-OSHA for the invitation and the chance to be here and share results from the campaign with you, and mostly to thank EU-OSHA for the great and really fruitful collaboration we have. A few words briefly, due to limited time, about our Senior Labour Inspectors Committee working group MX. You can see the names, and our moderator is going to present thoroughly all the members. Most of our members are inspectors, therefore we have been strongly involved in conducting inspection visits in the context of the campaign, and hence we have a personal idea of what lies behind the situation in the workplace. Many members are ergonomists, so experts in detecting the risks for MSDs and in drawing the adequate preventive actions and measures, and not to mention other specialties, of course. And of course we have the collaboration with EU-OSHA. A few words now about the Slick MSD campaign. The preliminary results showed that there was, as mentioned before, very strong participation from the countries. More than 1,000 inspectors were trained, and the tools that were implemented for the campaign were really appreciated from the countries, such as the report template, through which they had the chance to share with us the good practices and learning examples they found and the challenges they faced. I will refer indicatively, of course, due to time limited, to the motivation and learning examples from the countries, from some countries. Here we can see these photos actually taken from a video, due again to limited time. A vacuum lifting system from a food industry in Greece. For heavy loads, exactly to lighten the load for the worker. The most important part in these learning examples is the fact that the companies wanted to show to the inspectors all the processes they have implemented for preventing MSDs, and to prove in that way their motivation and awareness about preventing MSDs. From other countries, we were very delighted to read in the national report templates about warm-up and hand stretching exercises during the working event. In many cases, we had robotization of part of the line, installation of equipment that allows the automation of tasks, and in order to reduce or minimize the MSD's risks, and the installation of equipment such as anti-fatigue mats, foot rest, and tables of different heights, or another handling equipment such as coil lifts or lifting tables, for example. In the courier and transport sector, in the logistics, we read about a telescopic conveyor belt with platform that can move into the track and can be moved both horizontally and vertically, reducing in that way the operator's need to work in awkward and unfavorable working positions and postures. But, of course, there were challenges regarding risk assessment, for example, in the hairdresser sectors, where more than half of the companies had not conducted a risk assessment, and in the cases where there was one performed, only a small percentage was fit for purpose. However, even in that case, some employers were already implementing preventive measures. They were very eager to listen to the inspectors' improvement notices and to implement those in the workplace in order to make them better, healthier, and safer. And they were willing to seek for MSD's prevention knowledge. And the results also showed, as it was again mentioned before, that the workers' participation in the process of risk assessment can increase the quality of the result. Therefore, we can use these not positive cases for positive future actions and these challenges to redefine our strategies. I'm giving the floor now to our very experienced moderator, Ms. Annemarie Knudsen, who is a lawyer with a master's degree in law and a great experience in negotiating EU-OSHA directives and transposing those into the Danish legislation, as is from the Danish Work Environment Authority. And she is also a member of the management board of EU-OSHA. Annemarie, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angeliki. I would like to thank you for sharing with us the results and the learning examples from the campaign. First of all, I'll give you a bit of practical information. I encourage the audience, both those persons present here in Bilbao, but also the audience joining us virtually, to put questions to the presenters. For you who are with us virtually, you can write your questions in the chat, and the questions will be answered when all the presentations have been given. And for the audience present in this room, I will ask you to wait to put your questions until all the presentations have been given. I will now give the word to Yves de Grom. Yves is a labor inspector regarding the well-being of employees in the region of Ghent in Belgium. And most of the time, Yves is conducting inspections related to serious accidents, ad hoc inspections in construction, or inspections related to economic campaigns. The floor is yours, Yves.
Thank you, Annemarie. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to present to you the quantitative results from the SLIC campaign against musculoskeletal diseases. As you can see, these are quantitative results. My colleagues, they will bring the most important, in fact, the qualitative results. Okay? But everybody wants to know the numbers, I understand. First of all, how did we collect these data? We collected from every inspection that was taken out, some data. We collected this through the European EU survey, which was given by the Commission, or is done by the Commission. And there we asked some questions that every inspector or national project manager had to fill in after the inspection. For example, the risk assessment you found, is it fit for purpose? Did the workers participate in the risk assessment? Were measures taken? All these questions were filled in, and then we had some final results. In total, 26 European countries and nation Norway, they filled in this, or they also did these inspections through this campaign, and we had in total 2,621 inspections, which is a whole lot of inspections for one European campaign. Yeah. I will present you some graphs, but they are not statistical. I am not a statistician, we are not statisticians, but it will give you some idea of how the results were. As you can see, we did these campaigns in 5 sectors. Every member state could choose which sector they would inspect, and they had to do minimum 2 inspections and at least 20 inspections per sector. And as you can see, we had the hairdressers done, not so many, more than about 150, and they were rather all small companies, which is normal. Hairdressers and barbers are small companies. In the healthcare sector, we had about 500 inspections, and there you can see that we've inspected even small and big companies. It's about 50-50%. The same in the food industry, which is the biggest sector we inspected, about 950 inspections. Also 50-50% between smaller and bigger companies. In construction site, we had more than 400 inspections and about 650 in courier activities and transport. Now, this, I think, is one of the most important data. How many risk assessment fit for purpose did we found during our inspections? And as you can see, the 5 columns on the left give the results for each sector. The column on the right gives the total. And in total, we have approximately 50% of the risk assessment found fit for purpose during inspection. You can see there is a difference between the sectors. I think the courier activities, they give the best results. The hairdressers give the worst result. But of course, there are some biases. Again, I'm not a statistician. The bigger the company is, the bigger the chances that there is a risk assessment fit for purpose. But yeah, we can see 50% has a risk assessment fit for purpose. So I guess we still have a lot of work to do so that employees are protected against musculoskeletal diseases. This is a factor, or this is a graph that shows the distribution of the accuracy of the risk assessment against MSDs in relation to the size of the company. And this is, I guess, for most of the people, normal. The bigger the company, the more time there is for prevention, or the more attention there is for prevention, the better the results are. We also checked if workers participated in the risk assessment against musculoskeletal diseases, and we've put this in the diagrams on the left side to see size of the company. On the right side, the graph on the right is per sector. And as you can see, the bigger the company, the more workers representation, which is quite logical. And on the right side, you can see there is an average with the 4 left sectors that are at the same level, about 50–40%. Again, the hairdressers score a little bit lower, but that is, of course, they are also smaller companies. Why did we check this? We wanted to see if the workers' participation did ameliorate the risk assessment or not. Yeah. And then we saw if the risk assessment does not fit, left column, we see that more than about 90% in 90% of the cases, the workers did not participate in this risk assessment. On the right side, where we can see that the risk assessment was found fit for purpose against musculoskeletal diseases, more than 80%, in more than 80% of the cases, the workers' representatives participated in this risk assessment. So I think these are raw data, but this gives already a good conclusion that the more the workers are implemented in this risk assessment, the better the results will be for the risk assessment. Another, we've also checked if evidence-based methods were used for the risk assessment, and we checked the relative distribution of this in relation to workers' participation. And on the left side, I have it. Now I think of this, then I have it. I can show you that where evidence-based methods are used, workers' representatives participated in about 60% of the cases. If you can see, where there is no risk assessment, or no good risk assessment, workers' representatives did not participate in risk assessment. This is similar to the previous slide that shows the importance of participation of the workers. In this slide, I know the numbers will keep coming and the graphs keep coming, I know it's a lot, but there is a relative distribution of the use of evidence-based methods to the accuracy of the risk assessment. In total, we found 615, something like that, risk assessment, evidence-based risk assessment methods on 2,621 inspections. So 1 out of 4. But you can see where there is an evidence-based method used, we see that the risk assessment is more likely to be fit for purpose. Where there is, when the risk assessment was not fit for purpose, we see that there's only a small amount of evidence-based methods being used. It's not because you use an evidence-based methods that the risk assessment is good, of course. You have to do it right. But the relation is stronger if you use one of these methods, the bigger the chance will be that the risk assessment will be fit for purpose. So as I said, we had about 615 inspections where we found an evidence-based risk method, and the most common was the key indicator method from Bilbao. We also have some NIOSH and we have some harm, but more than 50% of the cases we found the key indicator method used as a evidence-based risk assessment. Even more important maybe than the question if the risk assessment was there and if it was fit for purpose was to see if the measures eventually were taken and the effectiveness of these measures were checked by sector. And I have to say that the numbers here are lower than the amount of risk assessments that were fit by purpose. So the continuation after the risk assessment was not completely found into the measures checked. So we can see here quite a variety from between 30 to 40 and even lower in the measures taken. And then the last, I can show a lot of more relations, but I will stop here because I think it will be an overload of data. The relative distribution of the relation between taking and checking measures and the accuracy of risk assessment MSDs. So as I said, the taking measures are lower than having a good risk assessment, but there is quite a strong correlation of having a good risk assessment and taking the prevention measures. So if the risk assessment was fit for purpose, you can see there is more than 50% of the measures taken. If the risk assessment is not fit for purpose, we see there are not a lot of measures taken. So I hope this overload of data will show you something. I think we still have some work as a Labour Inspectorate, and we will continue to do our best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yves, for this very interesting presentation. As a member of the working group MX, I'm sure I speak of everybody when I say that we are so grateful that you have the capabilities on handling the input from the questionnaires and transferring this input to graph and tables shown to us today. Thank you. I will now give the word to Tuula Uurala. Tuula is an inspector in the Regional State Administrative Agency for Southern Finland. Tuula will give us information on the campaign in Finland and share good practices from Finland when it comes to the help of psychotherapists in the care of elderly people. Welcome, Tuula.
Yes, that's okay. And that's there. Okay. Thank you, Annemarie, and good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here. I'm going to present some findings from Finland and one good learning example or good practice from Finland also. Okay. This wasn't that right. Yes. In Finland, we have conducted 106 inspections by 12 inspectors. And the inspectors found the inspections interesting and the welcome at the workplaces was warm. I think that maybe because this was an EU campaign, they are very keen on it. In Finland, employers' representative usually participated in the inspection visit because it's compulsory. We have to have the representative there. And usually also the employees usually participated in risk assessment, sometimes the whole work community. So in Finland we very seldom use evidence-based methods. External healthcare can do those, but not inspectors in assessing MSDs. This campaign brought up that we must develop our database system and inspectors' way of thinking by noticing better MSD risks. And also this identified the importance of enforcement in certain areas, I would say like construction sector and courier sector. This example is a round-the-clock care unit, 24 hours unit for elderly people with a defined caregiver ratio. It means 6 caregivers per 10 elderly people. The unit has a physiotherapist who is not allowed to participate in the actual nursing work, but she belongs to the caregiver ratio. And that nursing work means like medicine distribution and medical treatment. But after some initial problems, the physiotherapist's input was accepted by the nurses and other employees, and the nurses' work has been found much easier with that physiotherapist. So what does she do then? Her main target is employees. Normally, physiotherapist is in such kind of places to help those elderly people, residents, inhabitants, how can you say them? But not the main target are not employees. She's involved with nurses in everyday work from the morning. Sees what kind of posture treatment the inhabitant or resident need and teaches how to assist. Also shares information and training during the work. Economic guidance, education to colleagues on transfers, liftings and other physical work. Also kitchen work and cleaning, not only nursing work. I have to say also that means also that the employer could choose another nurse more, but she chose a physiotherapist instead. That's why there was some problems at the first. She noticed the need of equipment, transferring, lifting, handling immediately, and can anticipate future needs, repairs and orders also. Knows the inhabitants and knows and considers different colleagues like age, gender, physical capacity and height, and distribution of responsibilities. Like she helps with refreshments and meals and care plans. So here is some comparison between internal and external physiotherapists. It might have some advances to have an internal physiotherapist. As you see, she has a holistic approach, or he is part of the work community, is working all the day with employers, knows the needs, knows the work and working habits, notice stressful working postures immediately, and knows the hazard in night work. External, there is also many plus points. May have a good general understanding on MSD risks and may have good methods to assess, like those evidence-based methods. But is a visitor, don't know the inhabitants and employees, isn't involved in the work and sees the working just in that time when she is there and looking that. So in this case, the employees participate in everyday MSD risk assessments, because we have to remember that it's not a project, it's risk assessment is a continuous process. So, and last here is some physiotherapist message for you. Guidance and MSD risk assessment comes along with the work. And through routines we achieve more time. When the inhabitant or resident is independent, care is easier. I think it's a very important thing. I strongly believe in multi-professional cooperation to reduce MSDs. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tuula, for sharing information and reflections from the MSD campaign in Finland and the good practice you noticed during the inspections. And now I'll give the word to Yiannis Koudounaris from Cyprus. Yiannis works as a labor inspection officer in the Department of Labor Inspection of the Cyprus Ministry of Labor and Social Insurance. Yiannis will tell us about the learnings from inspections in transport and courier activities in Cyprus. So the floor is yours, Yiannis. Oh.
Thank you, Annemarie. Of course, thanks also to EU-OSHA for hosting this lovely event and to the Commission for making SlickMX possible in the first place. Okay. So, of course, this small presentation is about the learnings and these from our inspections in the transport and courier activities sector with a focus on innovative solutions. Of course, the NACE codes you see on the screen, NACE code 52 and 53, warehouse and support activities for transport and postal and courier activities, they consistently show up in the statistics. It was mentioned from Mr. William Coburn in the beginning that all the labor force surveys, the European Working Conditions surveys, the SNR, all show 3 out of 5 workers reporting MSDs. Of course, these MSDs are especially prevalent in these sectors. And that's why they were chosen as part of the campaign. So a total of 648 inspections were carried out in this field. 18 member states, labor inspectorates chose this sector, and they had to choose at least two or more. So 18 chose this one and additional ones. The majority of the workplaces which were inspected in the member states and in Norway, they were 38.4% small, up to 49 employees, and a close second, I add, 27% was what we are usually aware of regarding company size, 50 to 249 for this sector. For this sector, the MSD risk assessment fit for purpose, following on from what colleague Eve mentioned, for this sector specifically was found to be 56%, which was pretty encouraging. The participation of the worker representatives in the MSD risk assessment in this sector was found to be 51%, also one of the stronger numbers in this campaign. And last but not least, the measures which were taken and the effectiveness which was checked, 45%, but we are encouraged because this was also one of the high numbers. So of course, this sector, the transport and the courier sector, and all the work that goes alongside with it is, we all know what it is, it's intensive manual work, manual handling of loads, there's lifting, there's holding, there's carrying, there's pushing, there's pulling. It's static, awkward body postures, repetitive work involving multitasking, which in many countries, in many member states, we saw workers being told to do one thing with the left hand and another thing with the right hand at the same time. It's time-constrained work. Of course, we all order things online, and we all complain when the courier delays, but have a heart. Think of the people who work in the sector. Stressful environment, especially stressful, especially in the COVID pandemic. There's vehicle-related risks, road-related risks, accidents every day, work-related accidents which happen to these people. There's equipment-related risks. There's slips, trips, and falls, which builds from our earlier campaign, the SLIC campaign in 2014. There's falls from height. There's risks which we didn't know existed out of automation. You are happy that they make a system to automate, to make life easier, but then you have to do a risk assessment again to make sure the automation doesn't cause other risks. Of course, we had a uniform inspection regime. This is the same for all the 5 sectors. We used the MX working group checklist, which was duly translated by the Commission services in all the languages. All the competent OSHA labor inspectorates used it. Our regime was the same, the MX guidelines, and there were guidelines, a good guide for the inspectors in each member state, which was created by MX, a small guide for employers, mind maps for each sector, and other documents to help the campaign run along. The use of the evidence-based methods, as Yves mentioned before, the KIM was prevalent. It was the most used method. 50% of workplaces where an evidence-based method was used, they used the KIM method. Of course, there was also the HARM, the patient transfer assessment instrument, the ART, the MAC tool, and many others. For this specific sector, it was, for the transport and courier sector, the use of the KIM method was almost the same, 47-point-something%. So, of course, in this sector, we targeted large warehouses, courier distribution and logistics center, airport baggage handlers, seaport and waterway ports operations where there is intense manual handling taking place on a daily basis. Good examples and innovative solutions were found throughout Europe. And of course, for the manual handling in courier distribution centers, this is again difficult manual handling work. There's package manual handling operations. The workers are told to carry out continuous lifting and moving, placing of packages, scanning of the relevant barcodes, mostly at the same time, many times. Warehouse workers who have to pick up the items and stack them on hand lifts during the preparation of the orders, which have to go to the clients. Workers stacking small packages on trolley carts, using all other technical aids and then pushing these carts. And of course, somebody has to transfer the packages to the vehicles and then drive the vehicles out to the deliveries. Some good practices which we found in Cyprus. All the pictures here show on the left-hand side, avoiding the package manual handling to the extent which this is possible, using a flexible, adjustable, extendable conveyor belt, which is pretty high-tech. And on the right-hand side, the redesign of the work, try to avoid as much as manual handling as possible by stacking the packages on easy-to-push trolleys. Here are some more examples. In the courier distribution centers, a redesign of the interface between the conveyor belt and the vehicle, and on the right-hand side, to rearrange the vehicle so that the worker can stack and reach the package ergonomically, so when he or she is out for delivery, it makes their life much easier and lessens the musculoskeletal load on their bodies. And the innovative solution, which was also mentioned during the awards, manual handling in airport ground operations. Of course, we have all been through airports. We know, we understand that this is the perfect storm for MSDs, baggage handling work activities. They are high risk for MSDs, injuries and ill health to the ground workers. Lower back, shoulders and neck pain are statistically very, very high. Back characteristics such as the weight, the size and the grip, and it's not just bags. We see there's trolleys, there's pushchairs, there's skis, there's all sorts of difficult to handle and heavy loads which have to be put in the aircraft and then offloaded, of course. It's repetitive work. There is differing volume of bags in each shift according to airline schedules and airport operations, so there's no control over the amount of work that comes in each shift. Even the rest periods have to be compromised sometimes. It's time-constrained work. We all complain when the plane takes long to leave, delays, but again, think of the people who have to do the loading and unloading and to interface with these airport baggage systems. Of course, the workspace is limited, awkward body postures, especially inside the aircraft baggage compartments, adverse weather conditions, whether it's the heat in Cyprus or the snow in Stockholm, you still have to load and unload baggages in the aircraft. Noisy environment, PPE is mandatory, which of course protects workers but makes the MSD load even worse sometimes. The standard baggage equipment, handling equipment, which is pretty much standard throughout the airline industry, it's good, but it poses ergonomic limitations. So the innovative solution, which we met in Cyprus by an airport baggage handling company, was a wearable exoskeleton called the lift suit, and this can reduce the MSD risks to the workers during the loading and unloading operations. of the aircraft. It does it by supporting the back and the hip muscles during the manual handling by the workers. And there's some pictures. On the left-hand side is used by the kneeling worker inside the aircraft baggage compartment, and it's easy to see how difficult and what a strain it places on workers' backs when you consistently do this day in, day out. And on the right-hand side, used by the workers who are doing the loading, and they unloaded the loading of the bags on the conveyor belts at ramp level, which is using the KIM method slightly better than the people who are inside the baggage hold. Of course, the preliminary results indicate that there is a reduction in the potential strain on the worker's musculoskeletal system, and that, of course, is the way forward. There are also some other good examples which we found in the transport and courier sector. By no means they are the only ones. There are many other member states who have found very good practices. I just mentioned them very quickly. In Slovakia, for this sector, the transport and courier sector, we saw the use of technical means, such as a pallet truck, an electric forklift to prevent MSDs. In Latvia, there was introduction of automation and quantitative risk assessments. In Germany, new cars were ordered for the workers in the parcel delivery to take account ergonomics. So they looked at the car height, the space, adapting to the driver's height, and making the workers, the transport workers, the courier workers' life much easier and less strain on their back. In Belgium, logistics workplaces used telescopic conveyor belts with a platform to move into the trucks, doing horizontal and vertical motion to reduce the MSD risks. And in the Czech Republic, risk assessment for the courier workers who scans the packages with one hand and operates the computer with the other hand. They did a risk assessment to see how and what they should do to lessen it, or at least to make it easier. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yiannis, for an inspiring presentation on the MSD campaign in the transport and courier sector. Now I will give the word to Bogdan Sulava. Bogdan is an inspector in the District Labor Inspectorate of Krakow in Poland. Bogdan will inform us on learnings from inspections in food and drink industries with a worker's perspective in Poland. The floor is yours, Bogdan.
Thank you, Annemarie. Welcome, everybody. As it was described generally during the plenary session and also in previous presentations here, generally I think my presentation will fit for state of art was presented. So we know that awareness raising is very important, that risk assessment is important, also creating proper health and safety working conditions. But generally in Poland, if I may present the worker's perspective, which is the subject of my presentation, generally looks like that. It is the conveyor, it is the box, it is the cake. So this is the worker's perspective, and I could finish in that point. Because people, even properly equipped, properly trained, and supervised properly, don't pay attention to their own health. And here, during the plenary presentation, we are talking about the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Work, about the presidency. We should start discussion with the Ministry of Education, because we should educate people in that direction when they are 5, 6, or 7 years old, not when they are 40 or 50. But just to give you the picture of the situation in Poland on these 3 topics we should cover. Generally mentioned a few times, the minimum level of the inspection was 2 sectors and 20 inspections. We decided to make 2 sectors, except the food and drink industry, also healthcare and social care sectors. And what is the result? In that context, we are talking about. Generally, it was the division not suggested, because we give particularly to district labor inspectorates, there is 16 districts in Poland, just only the number of required inspection. And it was chosen by the inspector what level of employment they choose to inspect. So it was average 50%, something like that, because 2 first sectors and 3rd and 4th gives something like 50-50. And as you see, not very often risk assessment based on the science were used. what is the, not to give the impression that it is my opinion, I will share with you the opinion of my colleagues all over the Poland. Maybe not all of them, but generally starting with the northeast of Poland near the border with Belarus. They were supposed to make 2 inspections in the sector. As you see, the general idea was low awareness. Same when we are going alongside south to the still east border of Poland with Ukraine in this time. They also underlined, my colleagues in that district, that lack of knowledge and lack of awareness on every level, not only among the employers, about supervisors or members of health and safety internal services, but also about the employees. The problem exists, and this is the maybe main problem, because no matter it is a small factory, it is employment over 250 employees, generally lack of awareness is presented everywhere. Going up to the North region, Baltic Sea, generally the same story. Here we've got also rather bigger enterprises than micro enterprises, but also the problem with the risk assessment, which is treated only as fulfilling the regulations. Just formality, another one to have just skipped away, and I need to go back to it in everyday working life. Same in the central Poland. It's still difficult to conduct the proper risk assessment. Yeah? And same in Poznań region, which is assumed as more economically developed in all over the Poland. Yeah? So even in the biggest group, generally assessment is just because it is necessary to elaborate it. So there are also positive examples. I would like to picture here quite a black picture, yeah? But generally this is the reality. These are quotations from reports of my colleagues all over the Poland. Just showing that good examples also exist in the Opolskie region, generally strong connection with the Germany company on the base of Germany finance. The health and safety specialist is famous because she is also training the employees of VetNet in Germany, not only in Poland, because engagement of all people which should be engaged generally gives the proper result. So she is treated as a trustful person by the employees, and she has very strong influence on with staff to introduce to work the proper methods of working, to use the tools, because main problem is not only to give a tool to the men. Yeah? What is called innovative solution here, another report from neighborhood to mine in Krakow, in Kielce. Generally, they give the example of good solution, but they are not scientists' invention. It's typical equipment which should be used in every working station. So why it is not used? Just example from my own inspection. I made also 2 inspections in the Krakow region. You can see the distance between the container to which it is the quality inspection made by the employee, to which the cake which is not acceptable for further production is thrown out. And it's something like 80 centimeters from this woman. So generally the container has the wheels. It's not a problem just to grab it and get closer, yes? But she didn't do it. For half of the shift, because we were inspecting somewhere like in the about the midday, generally she was making that move. And it was also the big company also with the foreign investments, so they have a tradition and they have proper equipment, they have proper training and proper level of risk assessment. So influencing the people on every level, maybe it's the biggest challenge in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Bogdan, for the presentation on inspections in food and drink industries. It was very interesting to learn about the workers generally have a lack of awareness and knowledge. It's kind of a sad conclusion, but I guess it's a fact. I now give the word to Filipa Penestrello. Filipa is a Portuguese labor inspector from the Authority of Working Conditions. And I would say that we are so grateful that, Filipa, you made it today, since your plane was cancelled yesterday, but luckily you got here.
Yes.
So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Annemarie. I'm here to talk to you about learning examples from inspections in construction sector in Portugal. As you've already told us, we had 2,621 inspections from 1,055 labor inspectors all over Europe, of which 319 were in construction companies. In Portugal, we had 24 inspections in the construction sector. From the analyzed risk assessments, we found that 18 of them, the main ergonomic risk factors were collected and assessed. And from those, 9 of them had the full participation of the workers, and 6 had a partial participation of the workers. In these inspections, we can observe that we are still, the informative campaigns are still very well received, and that the information shared by the national labor inspectors is leveraged and often implemented. Employers and OSH technicians are open for new methods for risk assessment, and evidence-based methods are applicable in construction. So in our inspections, we could find some good examples of how to avoid risks or minimize the risks for MSDs. For example, this is a pallet truck, and it is used for brick transportation, and it helps avoiding manual loading and repetitive work. Also, we could find grips for precast concrete and transport cloths. The grips are used to avoid incorrect posture and excessive efforts on transport and application of shackles, rings, and concrete cones. And the transport cloths that can be used mechanically can also be used for manual transport, and it offers the workers a proper posture. It avoids incorrect postures and overexertion in the transport and application of concrete curb. Also, it must be maneuvered by 2 workers. It cannot be maneuvered by only 1 person. We also found drum clamps for truck cranes that it's used to avoid manual loading, unloading, and transportation of 200-liter drums. In the locksmith section of a construction company, we found rolling winches and sheet metal grippers that are used for moving finished products. They avoid manual movement efforts and incorrect postures. Also, in the cleaning activities, we found mechanical washing machines that help workers avoid repetitive work in the cleaning tasks. We also found other good examples in other European countries, such as in Austria. We found that the use of lifting equipment reduced the common strains remarkably. The Bulgarian inspectors observed that to overcome manual handling of loads, platforms were created for lifting bricks pallets to different floors, and after delivering the brick pallets, two workers would use pallet trucks to take the pallets to the working stations. And then in Ireland, a prohibition notice was issued, and after that, the studies were made, and an appropriate mechanical means were designed and installed on site for installing a large quantity of stone cladding. In Slovakia, our colleagues found that in the majority of inspected construction companies, evidence-based methods had been used. And in Spain, an inspected company was included on a specific program of physiotherapy center to advise on musculoskeletal disorders. And in Italy, the workers' representatives for health and safety were actively involved in mutual exchange of information with labor inspectors during the inspections. Thank you for your attention, and keep lightening the load.
Thank you, Philippa, for sharing the experience from the inspections in the construction sector. Well, now we are going to present the last presenter is Kiki Höök from Sweden, and again, this is a person we are very grateful that she's showing up here. She's actually interrupting her retirement to help us out, so please, Kiki.
Yes, thank you, Annemarie. Do you have strength for the last presentation? Good. I'm going to talk about learning from inspections in the hairdressing sector in Sweden. 79 inspections were made in Sweden out of 143. And as you see, and I think know, it's a lot of small companies, micro and small companies in this sector. 60% had 1 to 9 employees. It's even a bigger number in EU. It was, I think, 66%. And in Sweden, about 70% of the MSD's risk assessment process was not fit for purpose. Yeah, you saw all the pictures you started with, Yves, and this is the evidence-based risk assessment methods. 19 were used in the hairdressing sector, and in Sweden, some methods were used at 5 establishments. So that's a bit lower than average for the 5 sectors. And this also shows the workers' participation, and if the main risks were identified and assessed. And as you see, as you showed as well, Yves, that the quality increase when the workers participate. You know the hairdressing sector in different ways, I guess, and as you notice, there are some unfavorable work postures like prolonged standing and sometimes sitting, and the side bending of the body, and working with hands above shoulder height, and also unnecessarily tiring work postures. For instance, arm raised or away from the body. It's a good strength, static load on the shoulders. And also frequently seen that the worker's wrists deviate from the neutral position. And it's, of course, even worse if you have a big load in your hand. This is examples of experience from the inspections or from the inspectors in Sweden. We had a meeting, and some of This they saw when they were out on the inspections, that the awareness and interest and engagement were big in most of the companies. They also saw that it was newly opened establishments, a lot of barbershops, I think it's popular now, and there were young contractors with low knowledge, sometimes language barriers, and sometimes not aware of all risks if you take a wider perspective, for example, cash handling, threats and violence. And one issue that was very common is that breaks and recovery during the day was not that frequent. They work hard and they work with less breaks, partly because of provision part or reward. They used to have many hairdressing students, and the inspectors noticed that some students had really good knowledge of work environment issues, and some, of course, not. So that's an important way to have this education in the special branch. And it's very different depending on which school they have attended. Yeah, and then, of course, as you heard before, that often these employers are good at action and implementation, but seldom risk assessments or documentation. Hairdressers' learning examples from Greece and from Sweden. The majority have not conducted a risk assessment, but many have implemented preventive measures for the employees. They even redesigned their workplace and exchanged equipment like lighter hair dryers and scissors for left-handed employees. That's an example. So, last, we have to emphasize that these are preliminary results. But you know, in this sector, the risk assessment process, fit for purpose, was quite in a small percentage. It's potential for improvement. So that's a key issue, how to improve the risk assessment and all this, the strategy for these small companies. As I said, they are really good at action, but action without risk assessment. And how to improve this system. I hope we have a discussion about this and other subjects, because what's the consequences, what action without risk assessment. And also, as we heard before, that the workers' representatives in the process of risk assessment shows now that it can increase the quality of the result, even, of course, in this sector. And also that use of evidence-based methods in this process, we should encourage it. We're going to look more about this, aren't we? So, I stop there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kiki. And now I'll ask Angeliki, Eve, Yiannis, Tuula, and Bogdan to come up here besides me and be ready to answer any question that you guys would want to ask them. Yeah. please.
Thank you. I never see that number of labor inspectors outside a demonstration or with a union of labor inspectors. My main question I want to raise is how to ensure effective worker representative participation without needs on time to do it. Because you know that in France, the Health and Safety Committee are suppressed, that's make more than 5 years now, and we don't have the needs and the time to do this risk assessment that we used to do before. And I didn't even talk about the small company, less than 10 workers or 50 workers who don't have representative worker. And in every workplace, I mean, too. I underlined the Belgium example in Charleroi airport that we try to impulse in France in the Roissy and Orly airport. That make it maybe 10 years we work on it. But Charleroi is not Roissy. That makes a big difference. And the second point, the other point is how to ensure real independence of labor inspector. Because when you saw the campaign, you didn't have all the countries on this campaign. There's some of it, not all the member states participate to the campaign. Why I say that? Remember with the beginning of, because we talk about the care sector, when the labor inspector proposed to the people who work at home, for the elderly people to wear the mask, he preconized this solution to a small company. What was the response of the government? It was the ministry at that time sentenced him, and he was put away from his job. And the actual prime minister in France was the second Minister of Labor, and he confirmed the sentences. Last month, Anthony Smith, labor inspector in France, was relaxed, and the tribunal confirmed his position as an independent labor inspector. And that's a great victory, because with the last event with the labor inspector, that's the first big victory for the labor inspector in France. And the labor inspector in France claimed their independence. That's why we talk about les règles de l'art. The way to do the good the way to do the good work. That's the main theme in the main word is in our health and insurance system in France, where we have also kind of labor inspector with engineer. And the last point I want to raise is how to do the real campaign, because when I see the statistics, and I saw the one who were published in Europe, sometimes the risk assessment reach easily the 100% question of accuracy of this risk assessment. You could say it's in several, even the EU-OSHA in its websites show that some countries claim that, some ministry, I would say, claim that they have a 100% risk assessment. Bizarre. So the point is how to make effective the implementation of the legislation, and I want to remind what the ministry was there earlier in this speech. She said she will recruit more than 600 labor inspectors. And my main hope is that we do the same in all the country, in all the member states in Europe. That's we make it more effectiveness in the work, more effective presence of the labor inspector in the workplaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Yiannis, would you like to answer On the first question anyway. Thank
Okay,
you.
I heard you speak about Orly Airport. You mentioned the airport, yeah? Yes, okay. And you mentioned also worker representation and workers not having no time to participate in the OSH matters. But I think wider scope, the answer comes from what we heard in the big session. It has to come from down, up, not from top management. So the workers themselves have to, even if they're a very small company with fewer than 10 employees, which we're very familiar with since they're the majority of workplaces in Europe, they have to start their own initiative and make sure they let their employer know that there is a problem, a health and safety problem. But more than that, they need to suggest something. They need to suggest, they themselves need to suggest, look at this, all the tools, all the beautiful information that is in the EU-OSHA website and all other websites also, and suggest practical measures that their employer can take. And as we heard before, it's not always expensive. It's not, because you hear always the employer saying, oh, it's a lot of money. No, not necessarily a lot of money. You also mentioned independence. Shall I say something more? You mentioned independence of labor inspectors. Yeah, that's of course very, very important. And you also mentioned effective implementation of OSHA legislation. Yeah, we understand it. It's, as labor inspectors, it's not easy. And I just offer this as a thought. It so happens that we award a good practice, and at the same time we're in the difficult position to take punitive measures, court measures, against the same company. So that says a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Yiannis. I don't know who would like to say some words.
About your third question about the accuracy of the risk assessment, well, as a working group IMEX, we can only give training to national labor inspectorates that we believe is the inaccurate risk assessment, but then it's up to the inspector on the floor to assess this risk assessment. So, of course, numbers are numbers, and different views will always be there, I guess, but we can only give them the best information we have, and we've tried that to do this during this inspection campaign, I guess.
Perhaps I should say a word about that. Not all member states participated in this campaign. It's voluntary to participate in a slick campaign, and for different reasons, a couple of member states didn't feel that they could participate. Hopefully, they will participate in the next slick campaign. Thank you. I think there's a question here.
So, it's okay? So, this presentation brings to me a question that I have since many times. How could we judge the quality of risk assessment? We spoke here only about one criteria, the worker participation in the process. But risk assessment, there are a lot of practice, very different from country to country, from company to company. How could you, as labor inspector, judge is a real risk assessment or not? We know it is a definition of risk assessment. We have an obligation of employer to do a risk assessment. But does it is a standard for risk assessment? Thank you.
Thank you. Yves, would you like to answer that? Thank you.
Yes. Well, the workers' participation was not the only criteria of having a good risk assessment. There were also the amount of biomechanical factors. We gave them biomechanical factors, and we asked inspectors also if these biomechanical factors were there. We also mentioned if the evidence-based, The evidence-based, they always include these biomechanical factors. We also checked inclusivity of the group workers. So it was not only about workers' participation. We gave different possibilities of evidence-based methods to the inspector, depending on the sector. We cannot have the same risk assessment method in couriers than in healthcare, because you are handling with goods, and then the other sector you are handling with person. So we tried, again, it's a formation of the inspectors to try to understand which factors are needed in a good risk assessment method.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for your presentations. Thank you very much. We are from France, 3 of us, and we have participated in this campaign, and we are a little surprised by the fact that if I have well understood, 50% or maybe depending on the sectors of the companies use an evidence-based method. And it's not really the case in France at all. I don't have the figures in mind, but I think it's a very low amount of companies who are using a method. So we would like to know if you have, I don't know, method or campaigns, or how do you inform the employers so that they use these kind of methods? Thank you.
Thank you, Agnes. I don't know if you would like to answer that, Yiannis.
Thank you, Annemarie. Thank you for the question. Of course, evidence-based methods, as colleague Yves has mentioned before, is not the solution to everything. It is possible they have an evidence-based method, but the risk assessment might not be suitable. There might still be accidents and ill health in the workplace. So having an evidence-based method is not the solution to everything. Statistics, okay, depending on the sector, of course, depending on the member state, of course. But I give the example of Cyprus. Perhaps it's skewed upwards. Why? Because we had a previous national campaign, and we actively promoted the KIM method. If we hadn't had a campaign previously, and this was a yearly campaign, they wouldn't know about the KIM method, so they would not have an evidence-based method. But I believe it's good. It's good if they have evidence-based method. But if they don't have it, okay, maybe they have something else. Thank you.
My name is Axel Wertz from Germany, and thank you for sharing the best practices here, but following the words of Commissioner Schmidt and to educate workers and companies, and what Bogdan said, to start with the Ministry of Education. I miss actually some modular training programs for apprentices or trainers and trainees, and onboarding programs for the inventory staff. Do you think that it's worth to include it in your further strategies of inspections?
Generally, what I mentioned about the education of children, it's the basic conclusion, and it doesn't happen generally, because I heard about the program on Cyprus a few years ago, that they educate really children in kindergarten, not only in the danger we can face crossing the street, but also about what can happen at home with the electricity or something like that. I didn't mean that educational activity for workers and for supervisors and employers is not necessary. It's a basic thing we need to do, because every inspection we made, it's also the preventive action, because we explain to these people what they should done, how they should done, why it is so important to use, for instance, a special method. We cannot force them to use the particular method, but explaining why this method, for instance, KIM or MAC, the British one, generally is proper for their circumstances, it also gives the occasion to convince them generally to paying attention to health and safety matters. Because when you force somebody to do something, he will do it because he is responsible for some things. But generally, if he is not convinced about necessity to do it, he will forget in a few words, in a few weeks or 3 months or a few years. So I fully support educational activities of labor inspectors, but we cannot forget that the main action is the inspection and supervision. So personally, during every inspection, I'm mainly involved in the establishing circumstances and causes of work-related accidents. So I always try to explain why some mistakes led to the accident, not only to force improvement in particular area. So it's only the problem how to divide our forces, because inspection takes time, explaining also takes time. If we have what if set numbers we are supposed to fulfill, it's always difficult to choose. So I completely agree that education on every level is the basic role also. But the problem is how to organize our work to achieve both tasks. I think that's all. Thank you. Thank you for the question.
Okay, there's a person down there. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Marios Charalambous. I'm coming from Cyprus. I worked for many years as inspector, and now I work as an OSHA consultant. I would like to say that there is a lot of information around, but today's technology is there, and we are not taking advantage at all of this technology. We need to, all this information we have, and we are expecting people to be aware of, to transpose it to applications. Everybody today has a mobile device, an Android device. They have everything. I can see from my colleagues in NIOSH America how many simple applications there are for mobile devices, and they provide so much information, so important things, how to do and how to measure, how to calculate, how to find out whether the way they are lifting is within appropriate index or not. And not only this, in so many other aspects. Therefore, for me, in order to be able to inspect and have control, is first of all to make sure that the people out there, they have the right information, and the information that is approved by the competent authorities. Therefore, I will suggest on a European level to sit down and find out from the statistics which applications will be more valuable to work on them and make it happen. So to be for everybody easy to understand and see in no time, and in language versions as well, different language, not only in English. Like in the United States, they have it in English and in Spanish language, because they have a lot of people from Spanish-speaking people. This is how we need to approach. Besides this, we have the OIRA project. The OIRA project was tailor-made to cover the needs of all the small and small enterprises. So all the information is there. I saw the sector of hairdresser sector that is showing low rates. Why? I mean, this is the first OIRA tool that has been prepared from the EU-OSHA to cover the needs of this sector, because there were so many problems found in old surveys. And this is all I wanted to say, that inspectors cannot be increased in numbers. So this is what we have. Therefore, with this that we have in hand, how can we get the best out of it? So we try to disseminate the information in such a simple way to each and everyone, so from thereafter to be able to control and enforce the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have a remark to this? Yiannis.
Thank you, Marios, for your comments, very constructive comments. Of course, we can only answer as SLIC-MX, and we cannot extend elsewhere. Of course, we agree with dissemination of OSHA information, like you mentioned, and like we heard in the main session, yeah, tripartite, OSHA partners, social partners. We cannot just rely on labor inspectors to do this. So yes, we need to build on these relationships at country level, at EU level, and make sure we cooperate with the social partners to send all the OSHA information to every sector. Regarding the SLIC-MX, our group, all we can say is that, yeah, this was a one-of-a-kind event. We cooperated with the EU-OSHA, that's why we're here today, and we had a common campaign. First, there was information going out to employers and employees throughout the 5 sectors, and then there was an inspection campaign. So yeah, it's the beginning, huh? It's only the beginning. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll follow up on Mario's question. My name is Ernoult from Latvia. I think Mario's already sort of indicated one of the tools. I think OIRA is a beautiful example, which is kind of, I would like to say, an answer to those stats you provided, where in number of those branches, particularly in small and micro companies, you saw these low rates of, let's say, compliance, low rates of risk assessment presence. So OIRA is built just for that, let's say, main purpose, to tackle those small and micro companies. So my question to sector representatives who are presenting these specific sectors, when your inspectors were there, did you encounter, and if you know by, I don't know, by heart or by statistics, in how many cases OIRA was used, or the people were at least aware of such a tool? Because I think it's a beautiful tool which could solve at least a great number of those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Renas. I think would you? Oh, you did.
I can be very short on this. I did not encounter any OIRA risk assessment at the small levels. We did the two sectors. We did courier and transportation, food and drinks, and I did not encounter them. And generally, I don't see them much. So that's a shame, because I agree.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah, the Grömer Joint German program to prevent musculoskeletal disease. Yeah, I have a good idea for that. The German BAUA developed a new small brother of KIM. It's an entrance check, and it's available only in German. But while there's Google Translator, yeah, it's no problem. I think it's a good idea, and it's a good start. And the next we have to think about is what will happen if a hairdresser will fulfill a whole KIM. That will be better than calculating in advance by colleagues of us. So that's an idea we will develop, and we will proceed the next years.
Thank you for your information. Tim, do you have some virtual questions?
Hi, I'm following online questions to the panel. So I had 2 comments, questions come comments. One from Hungary, Ferenc, is saying that hairdressers in particular, it's often a self-employed person. It's a micro enterprise, even with 1 or even fewer workers. Yeah, how do we help them? How do we get to them? How can we reach to them and ensure they are preventing harm to themselves as self-employed workers, but also if they do have workers? So that's one question. And the other came from Christian, and he said, real-time data and data analytics tools can support MSD prevention and give it awareness to both individual worker and health and safety management. So, and this is a potential way forward for inspectors, the limited number of inspectors time we have. So this can be a way forward for inspectorates.
Okay, about the hairdresser sector. When they are not self-employed and they are just micro and small companies, so they have employees, because I don't know in other countries, but we are not supposed to inspect when they are self-employed. But in the other cases, from my experience, they were very eager to learn. And yes, in some cases, it was due to lack of knowledge, the whole problem of the risk assessment. And and as I said also in my presentation, they were very eager to listen to the inspectors' improvement notices. And in many cases, they came afterwards or in the follow-up inspection visits, some that we have already conducted. They have already tried to perform a risk assessment, even in a more, in a first level, but they wanted to seek for that knowledge. So I think with the inspections, the aim of that campaign was actually to broaden the knowledge for this issue, for the prevention of MSD. And I think that in that sector, we managed to do that. We spoke here about the preliminary results, but I believe that we have achieved something.
Yes, please, Tuula.
Yes, in Finland we have 2 years ago a campaign for those self-employed barbers and others, and it was very, very, very useful. There was cooperation between unions and we have information, and it reached over 10,000 barbers, and it was very in social media, and so it was very useful.
Thank you, Tuula. Yiannis, you would answer the second question. Thank you.
Thank you. It was about data analytics, yeah? So, of course, data analytics to help labor inspectorates sounds like a very good idea. But, of course, the new technologies, big data, artificial intelligence, yeah, that would be a dream come true for labor inspectorates in all the member states to have such software, such predictive software that can say, target that sector, target the hairdresser sector, don't target something else. Or you seem to have a problem with accidents in this industry. So yeah, that's things for our labor inspectorates to think about. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll take a couple of minutes break, because now we'll start a round table, and I would ask Karolina, Kiki, Philippa, Yiannis, you're already here, and Tim to join me up here. And Eve, you should stay. Pretty much 5 to 6. So does anybody in the audience have questions for this new panel? No? Everybody left? Well, then I have a question, and I think that's for you, Karolina. Vulnerable groups, how have we included those in the campaign?
Thank you. Well, actually, there was partly a question concerning the quality factors of risk assessment. And as Eve said, one of the factors was the inclusive issue. So it must be stressed that the framework directive and the individual directives, they all concerns and have set of regulation concerning everyone in the workstation. So it isn't important whether there are women, men, young or old, or other types of factors which we could take into consideration. All of the people has to be treated equally with the same attention. And that was one of the I would say main reason also, of course, a part of taking into account all risks which can cause MSD. So we distinguished in our checklist, which was equal for each labor inspectorate, for each inspection, few criteria, few groups of people whose presence should be taken especially into consideration, and we checked whether the employer also did that. The criteria were connected with organizational issues, like, for example, the schedules of working time, part-time workers. We took into consideration the workers, temporary workers from agencies, and also other groups connected of factors connected to individual factors, like, for example, multicultural groups of workers, the country of origin of workers, and also gender and age of person present at the workstation. So from our data, we can say that there is still some job to do and to motivate employers, especially from three sectors, from health care and social care, food industry and construction, who actually could put more attention to those vulnerable groups of workers. The data shows that, for example, gender is can be a pretty important aspect while MSDs aren't concerned. The women can suffer more often from upper and lower limb disorders, and men are suffering more often from the back pain. And for each factor, we can give the employer the data for that. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to motivate employers to put more attention to those groups, and we actually did it during the information part of the campaign, while labor inspectors, of course, they can give advice, and on the other hand, during the enforcement actions, which labor inspector also can enforce. While carrying out the inspections, we could see two phenomena. One is that, of course, those vulnerable groups were not included in the risk assessment process. And the second one, that actually all of the groups of workers were included, but while work was performed, the employers or teams who conducted risk assessment couldn't say why, what is the reason, what are the causes of such a behavior of employees. So for the first issue, the answer is pretty easy. Just sometimes when it is needed, the individual assessment should be done. Of course, the general philosophy of risk assessment is not to conduct it for each employee, but sometimes a special type of workers are present, so we need to look at that more carefully. And for another situation I mentioned, the employer can use other tools to solve the problems. For example, he can use BBS, the behavior-based safety system, just to search for causes of special type of behavior of employee, and then it is a great base to build actually the good communication and a culture in the enterprise. And of course, well, from my point of view, the most important thing is the engagement of top management, because actually if management is not showing the attitude which is supporting the middle management and the workers in OSH performance, well, not much can happen, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina. Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
see that EU-OSHA is cooperating with SLIC. This is a very, very important step because I strongly believe that labor inspectors can help a lot in the dissemination of information and in the collection of data for research on several topics, and since we are talking about musculoskeletal disorders, I would like to know your point of view concerning a future scientific research in cooperation with EU-OSHA. I mean, SLIC and EU-OSHA can cooperate, and with the help of the inspectors at European level can collect more in-depth data on this issue and come up with concrete results on how to prevent musculoskeletal disorders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to answer that question?
I will start. Thank you for the question. This is not the first time that EU-OSHA has worked with SLIC on their campaigning. I recall, I think it was 2007 in Poland, there was a manual handling campaign, I think led by Poland, and I think also Estonia, there was also the Slips and Trips campaign, I think led by Estonia, where we were supportive on that campaigning. But this is the first time we've had such a close complementary relationship, and the timing has worked well. So this is, we are progressively getting better at working closer with SLIC. And this is really important for us. It's not just collaboration with this campaign. We have been carrying out, for example, we did a survey with SLIC on high-risk occupations. We actually did a survey where we went and said, we got permission from the Senior Labour Inspectors Committee and said, okay, now can you please survey your inspectors? Okay, who is actually these high-risk workers we talk about? So we're collecting this information in, it's going through analysis, we have to be very careful on data confidentiality and things like this, but we are working that way on this, so this is going beyond the campaign. In terms of the work we're doing on this campaign on musculoskeletal disorders, the EU-OSHA focal points are our campaigning in member states. We do wonderful events in here, in Bilbao, at the closing event, in Brussels, and we go to the Parliament, European Parliament, things like this. This is us and EU-OSHA. But at the member state level, it is our focal points. And I would say there that our focal points are not all in the labour inspectorates. About a third of them are, a third of them in the ministry, and a third of them are in the National Institute. So it's a varied picture across the member states. So there's no one single solution for working together between the Labour Inspectorate and the National Focal Point. But it is complementary because we are awareness raising, we are information gathering, analysis and dissemination. And to take an example of what was discussed earlier, we can do our ESNA survey, which is great, and it tells us, we saw in some countries reported something like 94% of respondents to ESNA said they had a risk assessment. Fine. But we have no idea how many of those risk assessments are fit for purpose. And the only people who can make that judgment, and ultimately it's a legal judgment, and that's got to be by the Labour Inspectorate, who goes to that workplace and does the inspection and, if necessary, takes compliance actions. So there are limitations what we can do, there are limitations what the Labour Inspectorates can do, but we are increasingly working together and getting better results. And we are hoping to be able to get some data analysis out of the campaign, this SLIC campaign findings, which we can share, but we're still working towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kiki, please.
Can I go back to the micro and small companies? It's my heart for this. You had some suggestions and thoughts about how bring the small companies to do these risk assessments and use the system. Have you heard of the study from EU-OSHA, Sesame? It's quite an extensive study, isn't it?
Yes.
And there we looked at what do small companies need to come forward in the OSH work. And before this event, I went back. May I read a few lines? That micro and small companies wish that handling work environment should be tailored to sector, subsector, related to business goals, focused on how to do, not how to find out, low cost and personal. So OSH should be more integrated into the sector-specific education system. We talked about that as well. And offer micro and small enterprises solutions that are sustainable, easy to apply, and transferable. So I think we have to think how to inspect small companies and how we all can help this to come forward. Because in this study, you looked at what works for whom and in what context. It's not the same for all. I think that's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Kiki. More questions? Please.
Yes, I wanted to ask Floratou, European agency, did you find many group-related solutions? So particularly I refer to exclusion of older workers from several types of work. Because this will become more and more difficult if you don't replace the younger workers by migrants or any other type. So the number of the workforce is shrinking in Europe, and it's not possible to let the hard work do by the young people because they are more and more missing on the labor market. And you presented some very nice technical solutions, but did the companies also tend to exclude some groups from hard work? A little story, I was at my hairdresser and one hairdresser said, my colleague, who's fortunately the owner, cannot work this 10 hours standing anymore. He's too old. I said, how old is he? 52, he said. So that's 13 years away from pension age. And but he had the famous idea to have a share like a dentist. Not standing but sitting and circling around the client. Okay, but that's it.
Thank you. Who would like to comment on that question? Koudounaris.
Partly, I hope I will be able to answer to that, because actually, we were trying to collect the good examples during our campaign, and that's why we all are trying to also introduce you the good practice, the learnings that we have in positive way. So, but of course, from reports concerning OSHA or from individual inspections, we have some information, yeah. And yes, that's true. For example, as far as migrant workers are concerned, that they are mostly engaged for more physically demanding works. And there are many obstacles, many problems which they have to, they encounter actually during the work. And one of them, again, also concerning risk assessment process and the lack of inclusivity in the process, the migrant workers, is, for example, the language. Yes, in Poland we have many workers from Ukraine right now, and one of the, well, I would say, important major problems is language. Yeah, if we don't have the middle supervisors who speak Ukrainian or Russian, it is pretty difficult to give the right orders, to give the instructions of how to perform the work properly. So, of course, there are some problems, but on the other hand, for example, while we do our colleagues the investigations concerning circumstances and causes of accidents. We also try to engage the interpreters who are employed in our authority. So yeah, there are some issues on the market, but we are trying to well, fight with them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carolina. We are coming close to an end, and I would like to say that from a SLIC perspective, it has been a great advantage to collaborate with EU-OSHA on preparing and carrying through the SLIC enforcement campaign. But we have some timing challenges if we should do the same again, because as you probably know, EU-OSHA, they chose the topic many years ahead, and we are a bit slower in SLIC, so we have a challenge, and I think if we could kind of get a solution there where we could kind of talk together and find a common topic for campaign, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, it's there is two different management processes that go on for the Senior Labours Inspectors Committee and one for the EU-OSHA, which has a tripartite governing board, and the planning cycles are different. Because we will have our next campaign starts next October, it will not fit on the cycle quite so well with the next SLIC campaign, but it does not mean we will not be collaborating. It does not mean we will not be supporting. It may not mean that we are sitting here like this in 3 years' time, but there will be ongoing collaboration. There is a working party which EU-OSHA is on, and we are working together. And again, for sharing the information and cascading and working with our focal points and SLIC, this will very much continue. But we work in the real world.
But I would like to thank you, audience, for having the patience to hear on our talk, and we would like to say thank you for now, and hopefully we see you in tonight at 8 o'clock, where we can further discuss the subject if you would like to. So thank you.
Thank you.